The main character froze when her father told her that he had finally found a suitable groom for his daughter. The father of the blonde girl was the Pope, whose name was Borgia. The main character pulled a smile on her face, trying to hide her despair. The second son, named Engen de Borgia, exclaimed that not even 3 months had passed since the dissolution of the previous marriage. The Pope wanted to stop his son, but the guy interrupted his father. Engen said indignantly that no matter how good the union was, it was necessary to think at least a little about Rudbeckia's feelings. The second son said that the best knights of the south could easily beat these uncivilized barbarians. The Pope looked sternly at his son, and with an icy tone ordered Engen not to get into trouble. The main character realized that it was starting again, so with a big smile she asked her father who this groom was. Borgia said that this man is known as the best knight in the north and a prisoner who is greatly cherished by the king. Ruby knew that her father would not even dream that that handsome knight of the north would commit a mass murder in his father-in-law's pulp in the future. Goosebumps ran down the body of the main character as soon as the girl felt a familiar smell behind her. He was the eldest son in the family, whose name was Cheshire de Borgia. The main character, with a wide smile on her face, thanked her father, saying that she was so glad that she could bring him help. Cheshire moved closer to his younger sister and kissed her on the forehead. The black-haired man pulled back slightly and said that Ruby was very pretty. The main character decided that after shaking the contents out of her stomach to her heart's contents, she would think about a further strategy. The girl's past life was cut short due to a helicopter accident, and she began to think that she would finally find peace. However, the main character became the girl of one dramatic work. This character from the book that the main character read before her death had the same painful life in a similar environment. As soon as the young girl returned to her room, she immediately cleared her stomach, standing over the toilet. The main character did not understand why, at least in her new life, she was not given a more adequate family. Ruby was used to kissing the toilet in secret, even though it was still hard for her. All this was because another similarity between her past and present life was anorexia. Before the main character became Rudbeckia de Borgia, or rather before her death, the girl was born in South Korea. The girl was then adopted by an upper-class Spanish family, which allowed the child to go to a prestigious private school. The life of the main character was filled with ballet school, tennis club, horse racing, and charity. But one day someone began to make fun of the girl, and the main character did not understand the meaning of all this. The girl just laughed with all the other guys and could not even imagine that they were copying her. Time went by and the girl could endure the incoming insults towards the main character. The family that adopted the young girl was only outwardly virtuous and good. In fact, each of the parents had his own lover, and the second older brother enjoyed drugs and debauchery. The older sister of the main character, who was the only one who treated Ruby well, committed suicide at the age of 21. Even the eldest brother, whom the main character considered normal, turned out to be a monster, just like her father. Pretending to be a cheerful, smart, obedient, and just perfect daughter has become a habit for the girl, since if the main character had made a mistake, the girl would have to pay heavily for it. Be that as it may, in this life the young girl met the same picture because at the age of 16 she read a novel. This book was written on the principle that good always triumphs over evil. At a time when the clergy sank morally, respectable people destroyed the Pope and his family. Rudbeckia herself was the daughter of the Pope, which means that she also had to die in the end. The most important thing is that the main character was to die at the hands of the man she was to marry. As a political chess knight, Rudbeckia remarried after 4 divorces. István Omerta became a sacred knight of the north at the age of 15. At 17 years old, the young man was the youngest winner in history in a fight against monsters. Even after that, as a paladin, Iska showed his pride. The young man made the hearts of many girls in the north flutter. Iske reacted rudely to talk about marriage and adhered to asceticism, which is why he caused a lot of trouble to his father. Of the women, Iska was at least somehow close only to his younger sister and childhood friend Freya. The man's mother, a princess head over heels in love with the young duke, committed suicide. The main character believed that such an incident had an incredible impact on 2 children. The soul of a person who committed suicide was cursed by God and sank to 0. It was for this reason that Ruby did not understand how it happened that such an impudent person as Iske calmly agreed to marry her. Although the main character understood that if Iska refused, his younger sister would have to marry Engen. Ruby assumed that the man thought that it was better to marry himself than to marry his sister to a blockhead, since now all the combat forces of the Vatican were in the territory of internal conflict. They could not cope with the barbarians. The price for receiving help from the Kingdom of Britain, which possessed outstanding knights, was marriage. According to the plot of the novel, Iska killed his father-in-law's entire family because Rudbeckia poisoned his younger sister. The main character knew perfectly well that the main antagonist of the novel was ordered by Cheshire to poison her sister Iska. There were many rumors about Rudbeckia that the girl was a spy for the Pope and a dissolute villain. But in addition to all this, the character of the blonde girl left much to be desired. Rudbeckia treated her younger sister Iska and his childhood friend like a servant. 3 years have passed since the main character found herself in this world, and the girl understood in a new way why Ruby was crazy. The Princess of Romagna, who received love from her entire family, was actually a Sistine Lark. All this was in fact a well-thought-out performance, which was not similar to the girl's previous life. The main character shuddered as soon as the eldest son of the Cheshire family entered the room. The man said that he was worried, so he decided to look into the girl because she looked drooping. The main character smiled feignedly, although she knew perfectly well that this guy was pretending to be an affectionate older brother. Cheshire asked if the girl didn't like her future marriage, asking her to be honest. The main character knew perfectly well that if she told everything honestly, she would definitely get a slap on her face. Ruby said with feigned ease that she herself did not know what was happening to her. The main character added that she would be lonely in the north, since she would not be able to see her older brother often. Cheshire recalled that Ruby would have a husband, and the blonde girl replied that it had nothing to do with it. As soon as Ruby said that she wanted to live with her brother for the rest of her life, Cheshire put his hand on her head and told her that it was an honor for him. The eldest son of the family smiled and said that the beauty of Romagna wanted only him. The main character was well aware that the touch of the hand could become cruel at one point, and the protective wall could collapse. The blonde girl perfectly felt how goosebumps began to run all over her body. Ruby didn't understand how, with such affection for her, Cheshire could hurt her quite calmly. When the main character was 15 years old, the girl just got used to this place. At that time, rumors began to circulate about a wedding with the Duke of Rembrandt, with whom the marriage in the original was dissolved for a shameful reason. Since Ruby loved her family members very much, who treated her well, the girl refused to marry the Duke. At that very moment, from the cold gaze of the Pope, the main character felt a shivering déjà vu. That night, the girl was beaten by Cheshire until Ruby began to beg for mercy, realizing what situation she was in. This incident also included the fact that Rudbeckia turned out to be a stepdaughter. A girl named Carmen, who died immediately after giving birth, became pregnant even before she met the Pope. Since the new life was similar to the previous one, Ruby instantly mastered the way of survival, pretending to be an excellent actress. Cheshire, with a warm smile on his face, said that he was also afraid to send a blonde girl. The main character wrapped her hands around the cup and said that she had heard that there were many monsters in the north. Cheshire put his hand on the girl's face and said that the knights would protect the girl, promising that he would definitely visit her when he could. The man brought a strand of Ruby's hair to his lips and said that the girl needed to last only 6 months in marriage. Cheshire had promised Ruby that Guy wouldn't be able to touch the girl, so she didn't have to worry at all. The main character looked at the man from the man's eyes and asked with a warm smile if he would definitely visit her. Ruby really hoped that Cheshire would not come to her, because the girl already had enough of one survival plan. The main character thought what would happen if she did not kill her husband's younger sister, but realized that Cheshire would do it. If that had been the case, everyone would have been 100% sure that Ruby was the killer. That is why within 6 months the main character had to prevent the massacre of her husband's younger sister. The next day, the young girl was dressed in a beautiful pale pink outfit. The Pope came out to see his daughter off and smiled broadly when he noticed exactly what the girl looked like. The man said that Ruby is so irresistible that the whole North should definitely fall in love with her. The Pope smiled warmly and promised the blonde girl that he would miss her very much. Ruby was very happy when the man said that Cheshire could not accompany his sister due to a certain situation. The main character knew perfectly well that there were many different dirty rumors about her and Cheshire. The girl did not understand whether her father did not see those looks of the inhabitants of the north, full of hostility towards her brother. The main character wanted to understand whether the Pope was seriously unaware or just squinting like a fool. Engen asked irritably why everyone was so calm except him, because he would explode with anger very soon. As soon as the main character approached her brother, the second son immediately hugged the blonde girl. Ruby clung tighter to her brother, because he was the only person in the family who had never hurt her. The main character promised Engen that she would definitely miss him. The second son hugged his sister even tighter and said that he would not miss such a fool. Cheshire irritatedly told Engen to stop hugging Ruby so tightly because he could strangle her. The man again promised that he would definitely come to the blonde girl to visit her. Suddenly, Ruby had a thought about how strong and comical the survival instinct was. The main character really wanted to die and eventually got killed. Despite the fact that Ruby is imprisoned in a second life, no different from the first, the girl tried with all her might to survive. The blonde man wiped the sweat from his face and said that his comrade would stop already, otherwise all the soldiers would die soon. The man turned to Iska with the words that they needed to talk. The Duke of the North took off his helmet from his head and looked at his comrade with his red eyes. In a tone that did not require objections, Iska replied to the blonde man that he did not want to comply with his request. The Northern Duke's comrade changed his face and asked irritably what the man meant. The blonde man asked why the Duke was going back to his old ways, to which Iska replied that Ellen had asked him to do so. The Northern Duke's comrade asked if the man was going to sit still and lay all the problems on him. Iska asked in response who was to blame for the fact that the man could not resist his sister. This question from the Northern Duke made the blonde man freeze and say that Iske is a bastard. The Duke's friend said that his bride had already arrived and no one had asked her to meet Icy. The man offered the Duke at least to eat with the girl, to which Iska replied that there were already many people who wanted to meet his bride. The blonde man was about to say something about himself as a paladin and guardian of the North, but Iske interrupted him. The Duke's companion exclaimed that he had met Iska's fiancée unlike him. The blonde man explained that he just wanted to look at the daughter of the Pope with at least one eye. The knights, lying exhausted under the tree, thought that these two men were clearly worth each other. The blonde man put his hand to his head and apologized to the Duke for being a little rude. The Duke's comrade wondered if Iska was not at all interested in how the girl looked and what kind of character she had. The Duke of the North calmly replied that he was not particularly interested in knowing. The blonde man asked his friend to prepare to fulfill his marital duties. The man added that otherwise all sorts of rumors will spread, which until recently were circulating about the guy from Rembrandt. The comrade of the Duke of the North knew perfectly well that it was useless to say anything to Iska, since the man would not understand everything. Earlier, the blonde man went to see the bride's escort to the Omertov castle. From Lord Evans, who took part in the marriage on behalf of Iske, the man heard that the lady was vomiting all the way. But despite this, the girl was still smiling and was so beautiful, which confirmed all the rumors. However, the blonde man noticed that a slight anxiety slipped over the girl's radiant face every now and then. The companion of the Duke of the North began to stretch his back and informed his friend that the lady was small. The blonde man showed Ruby's height with his hand and said that the girl was very small. The Duke's comrade of the North asked his friend to think at least a little about his wife, even if this marriage was not to his liking. The blonde man assured his friend that the daughter of the Pope was probably scared and lonely because she was like a hostage. The Knight of the North claimed that the Sistine Angel himself had descended to them from heaven to become the wife of his beloved comrade. Iska asked if his friend had already changed his mind about killing the Pope, to which he replied that now it was just to talk about his wife. Suddenly, the men heard a voice that asked if they were really ready to sell their homeland for the appearance of the Borgia's daughter. The men immediately turned around to see who had addressed them. The violet-eyed young man put a wooden sword to the Northern Knight's throat and looked at him sternly. The blonde man exclaimed that how dare the ill-mannered reptile point his sword at his older comrade. The Duke of the North asked Lorenzo why the guy decided to make a commotion now. The blonde guy with purple eyes looked at Iska, who was staring at him sternly. Lorenzo said he would be happy if Sir Issei married his older sister after he divorced the Pope's daughter. The Duke's companion and Isk himself froze as soon as Lorenzo added that for the time being, the Duke had to pretend that he did not know the girl. The Knight of the North hit Lorenzo on the head and demanded that the young man express himself more intelligibly. Lorenzo apologized and explained that he wanted Sir Issei to distance himself from his sister for a while. The purple-haired knight added that the witch Borgia might otherwise torture and kill his sister. The Duke's companion said that Lorenzo should watch his tongue, because the milk on his lips was not even dry yet. The knight with purple eyes asked why his sister, who had looked into the castle of Omerta, had locked herself in the room and was crying. The blond man was not surprised that the young man's sister cried after meeting Iska's sister. The Duke's comrade called out to Iska when he noticed that he was going somewhere. The Duke of the North said that he was leaving because today was a day of rest. At the same time, the knights, lying on the ground under a tree, pretended that they did not see or hear anything. The aristocrat told Ruby that she had heard how badly the girl had been seasick on the ship, and Ruby replied that it was the first time it had happened to her. The main character shamefully admitted that she had never left the South, so she was a little unaccustomed to it. The lady with the gray hair calmly replied that the girl had nothing to be ashamed of because she had never left Arendelle either. The main character was delighted with the beauty of Iska's younger sister named Elena van Omerta. Ruby didn't eat much because even light food always came out of her anyway. Iska's younger sister began to apologize to the girl for not being able to give her a warm welcome. Elena said that now Mrs. Ruby can change her home life and affairs completely at her own discretion. The aristocrat said that the girl could give instructions through the head servant if she did not like something. The main character felt awkward from the realization that she had just been called a mistress. Ruby replied that she wanted to leave things as they were for a while because she was afraid of causing harm. Iska's younger sister said that the girl should not worry about this at all because no one will say anything. The main character immediately felt uncomfortable because Elena treated her very respectfully. The young blonde girl admitted that she had one small request. The main character blushed and asked her younger sister Iska to call her just Ruby for a while. The girl said that she does not know anyone in this place, so she is a little scared and does not understand how to adapt to a new place. Elena agreed, as soon as Ruby added that she would have the courage if the girl would address her a little closer. The main character did not expect at all that Iska's younger sister could agree to her proposal so quickly. The main character grabbed Elena's hands and thanked the girl with a wide smile. Coming to her senses, Ruby quickly recoiled and began to apologize for her tactlessness. As soon as the aristocrat replied that everything was fine, the main character embarrassedly asked if she could call the girl Ellen. Iska's younger sister calmly said that they should both address each other freely. Ellen added that there is nothing good in being too tight, because modesty causes misunderstanding. The main character realized that if Ellen was probing her like that, then she looked strange. Ruby's main goal is to show herself as harmless as possible and not to get the love here. At first, the main character retained her composure and then replied that she was used to receiving misunderstandings. Ruby promised her younger sister Iska that she would try to make sure that this did not happen again. Elena offered the main character to show her chambers if the girl had already finished her meal. The daughter of the Pope of Rome asked with admiration whether this luxurious room really belongs to her. Elena said that they tried their best to decorate the room for Ruby so that the girl would like it. The main character admitted that she had always wanted to have a room with a view of the sea. Iska's younger sister said that Ruby was most likely tired from the journey, so she should rest. The main character was happy that her goal was far from being related to her husband's love. The headmaid peeked out from behind Mistress Elena and looked at the main character suspiciously. Ruby could not sleep at night due to the fact that her body did not stop shivering due to the extreme cold. The main character was a little surprised to notice that all the lights in her room went out. Since there were many monsters in the north, sacred fires were lit in the castle every night, which could not turn off on their own. The main character did not understand at all who decided to joke on her in such a childish way. Suddenly, it dawned on the young blonde girl that it could be the same senior maid. Suddenly, hearing a strange noise behind her back, the main character turned around and noticed a huge monster in her room. The young girl was well aware that right now she needed to run urgently, but her body did not move at all. The maid went into the bedroom and asked if the young lady had woken up. The maid began to scream in horror when she noticed a huge flying monster in the room. Iska's younger sister burst into the room and excitedly called the main character by name. Suddenly, there was a metallic sound in the room of a sword being drawn from its scabbard. At the same moment, the body of the huge flying monster was cut into 2 pieces. The main character froze as soon as she realized who exactly was standing right in front of her right now. The Duke of the North looked at his wife completely emotionlessly. In an icy tone, Iska asked why the young girl had turned off the sacred fire. The main character smiled in confusion, not believing that the man really thought that she did it. Iske said that, in his opinion, the girl had already attracted enough attention to herself. The Duke of the North wondered if the main character wanted to make it a pretext for dissolving the marriage. The main character imagined that the Duke would not be delighted with her, but she could not even think that to such an extent. Suddenly, Emily joined the conversation, asking her older brother not to attack Ruby like that. The lady explained that the girl could simply not know this, because in Romagna they do not light sacred fires. The main character mentally promised that she would definitely save Elin, even if she had to give her life in return. The Pope's daughter snuggled up to her younger sister Iska and muttered that she was just very cold. The Duke of the North indignantly asked if the girl could not speak louder at all. The main character explained that she just woke up and saw that the sacred lights were no longer burning. Ruby added that she herself may have turned off the lights in a half-asleep state and apologized for the inconvenience. The main character, with tears in her eyes, promised that this would definitely not happen again. Iska's younger sister began to calm Ruby, and the Duke of the North rolled his eyes. The main character looked at the man when Iska said that he wanted to ask something. However, after changing his mind, the Duke of the North turned around and told the young girl to forget what he had just said. The main character was interested in finding out what exactly the man with red eyes was going to say to her. The next morning, Ruby had breakfast in the company of the Duke of the North's younger sister. The main character did not get anything into her throat at all, and because of what happened, the girl felt bad on her stomach. Ruby really hoped that at least someone would say that what happened last night was just a terrible dream. Iska's younger sister said that the fact that Ruby woke up at night from the terrible cold would not happen again. The main character thanked her for her care, and she thought that Alina did not consider her a criminal at all. Iska's younger sister reminded the girl that in 4 days, Ruby needed to attend a reception at the royal palace. The main character asked Alina to provide her with a dressmaker because all the outfits brought to her would be striking. Iska's younger sister was a little surprised and replied that the blonde girl had noticed correctly. Aylin apologized for her inattention, and Ruby understood the girl perfectly because everyone was already against the wife of the Duke of the North. The main character knew that she had to try to leave a good impression on the soul of important personalities on the day of the appointment. However, the girl was well aware that the most important person, namely her husband, had already managed to dislike her terribly. The main character collected a basket of fruit and really hoped that the man would not beat her for it. The reason Ruby went to the temple, making Helene's request alone, was to find out her husband's character. That is why the main character was determined to show her husband what a harmless rabbit she can be. The main character remembered that Alina was poisoned because she was engaged to the prince of the state of Dorias. The Pope had a bad relationship with the prince, and the Borgia family's activities in the secret murders were a secret. It was utterly absurd to poison a person in such a situation so thoughtlessly. Ruby was sure that even if she said in advance that Alina would be poisoned, no one would believe the Borgia princess's chatter. The main character knew perfectly well that her father's spies were placed around the whole of Arundel, which meant that she could not say anything. The young girl was frightened when a man's voice behind her asked if the mistress was looking for anyone. A companion of the Duke of the North asked if Lady Rudbeckia was now peering around the corner. The blonde man explained that he had been one of the members of the Defender Squad in the port of Elmos yesterday. The Duke of the North's comrade enthusiastically asked why the young lady had come to the training grounds. The main character admitted that she heard that her husband was in this place. The comrade of the Duke of the North was very surprised when he realized that the young girl wanted to see Iske. A man with a big smile on his face asked if the girl had come to check on Iske. Upon receiving a positive response, the Knight of the North asked the young lady to wait a few seconds. The man ran to the parade ground, shouting at the top of his lungs that his wife had come to him. At the same moment, the main character realized that the blonde man's tongue is not as noble as the appearance itself. Behind her, Ruby heard a man's voice who asked rudely why the girl had come to this place. The main character turned around and immediately noticed the Duke of the North, who was looking at her with his red eyes. The young girl did not understand why all these men appeared from behind her back. Ruby began to grumble that it seemed to her that the man was in a bad mood because of her in the morning. Iske said that it was a color and smelled, so a young girl could leave immediately. The main character wanted to stop the man, but he turned around sharply, which caused the fruit basket to fall and crumble. Ruby realized in her mind that everything was lost, because Ruby said that these fruits are very expensive. The main character remembered the 3-second rule and began to rapidly collect fruit from the ground. The young girl froze when a man's voice casually asked what she was doing now. The main character apologized with irritation and said that she had come to this place to give the Duke fruit. Isuke explained that he asked why the girl was picking up something that had just fallen from the floor. The main character, deciding to use her acting, cried and said that she just wanted to resolve a misunderstanding. Ruby began to say that she perfectly understands what the man thinks of her and why he hates her so much. The main character was going to say something else, but the Duke of the North interrupted the young girl. With a sly smile on his face, Isuke asked who said he hated the blonde girl. The main character began to explain that she meant that the man did not like her, but he denied this fact. The young girl was even surprised that her tears had the opposite effect, so she decided to change tactics. The main character, with eyes burning with delight, asked if the man really thinks so. Noticing the man's reaction, the young girl realized that she had gone too far with joy. Isuke combed his hair back and tiredly asked himself what he was doing now. Ruby, full of determination, decided to get excited, but she was even surprised that the man showed such a reaction the first time. The Duke of the North bent down and, without looking at his wife, picked up all the fallen fruit from the ground. Isuke handed his wife a basket and told her not to do such stupid things again. The Duke of the North said in a serious tone that he would not care if this clowning ended today. The main character froze when Isuke asked her to write a letter home to be taken back. Ruby realized that she could not pretend to be poor in front of her husband. The lady was sure that Isuke thought that by arranging a verbal skirmish with her, he would only show himself from the infantile side. The main character concluded that if she did something obvious and trivial, then Isuke would not suspect her. The Duke of the North stopped when Ruby exclaimed that she didn't want to do it at all. The main character quickly decided that she needed to strike again. The young girl shouted loudly that she had actually fallen in love with her husband. All the soldiers who were at the training ground at that time opened their mouths dumbfounded. The main character was sure that even angels fall from heaven from her acting. However, the Duke of the North asked in an icy tone what the young girl had just said. Ruby began to say embarrassedly that she understood perfectly well that she heard these words often and that the man might not like it. The main character said that the man was the first to save her from danger at night. Ruby said that she didn't want anything, but she asked to be allowed at least the slightest help. The girl knew that if her actions were obvious and unremarkable, then she would have hope. The Knights of the North began to clap their hands and shout enthusiastically, trying to support the girl with all their might. The main character did not even notice how the Duke of the North had already managed to reach the door. The young girl exclaimed that she promised that she would never behave intrusively with a man. The door slammed shut, and a million curses immediately flashed through Ruby's head, but the girl decided to end for today. A few days later, the maid did the hair of the main character and dressed the girl in a very beautiful dress. Isuke hasn't shown his nose since that day, but Aelin told the main character that paladins have a lot of things to do in the summer. Ruby went downstairs where she was greeted by Isuke's sister, surprised that the girl had already finished her preparations for the reception. The main character could not understand how such a goddess almost married her fool Engen. Ruby asked who Milady was standing next to Aelin, to which Isuke's sister replied that she was an old friend of their family. The main character saw a beautiful girl with purple hair whose name was Freya Van Furien. Aelin's friend winked at the Pope's daughter and, with a big smile on her face, said that she was very glad to meet the girl. The main character realized in an instant that this was the same childhood friend. Ruby immediately noticed that the maids treated Freya very differently than they did her. The main character smiled broadly and said that she was also very pleased to meet a young girl. Freya told Ellen with a smile that she hadn't said that Isuke's wife was such a beautiful person. However, the main character paid attention to the disdainful look Freya gave her. The daughter of the Pope suggested that perhaps something was wrong with her dress, so the girl looked at her so strangely. Aelin told Ruby that her brother would be late, adding that it happened to him quite often. The main character pulled a smile on her face and replied to Helen that it was okay, and the girl should not worry. Be that as it may, even if it was too late, Ruby still wanted Isuke to come. After some time, the main character and her companions arrived at the royal court of Angwan. For some unknown reason to the young girl, she had to remember receptions in Romagna. Namely, Ruby remembered people who showed kindness to her and the owner Julia in order to make acquaintances with her father and brothers. Despite the inner side, the main character was the object of envy and imitation by many people. The daughter of the Pope felt like a toddler among two models. The main character shuddered when she suddenly heard that someone had turned to her. The guests of the event began to ask the girl how His Holiness was doing. The rest of the people looked at the main character and immediately recognized her as the wife of the knight Omerth. Ruby began to bombard with questions, asking when Cardinal Valentino planned to visit Arundel. Iski's younger sister came closer to the main character and said that she was shocked by this idol. The Pope's daughter was very surprised that Alina had just said such words. The Duke of the North was alert when he heard a familiar female voice call out to him. The red-haired man turned his head to the side and looked at his girlfriend. The main character waved her hand, not understanding whether the man hung noodles on her ears so as not to meet her. The Duke of the North immediately turned away, and the blonde girl was immediately convinced of the correctness of her thoughts. Freya invited the main character to come up and reprimand the young man for such an attitude towards his wife. The blonde girl clenched her hands into fists and rushed towards the red-haired man. The whole universe already knew how heartlessly Iska behaved with her on the very first day. Ruby knew perfectly well that no matter what she did, she would be disgraced, so she had no choice but to go ahead. The main character approached Iska and with a wide smile on her face said that she was very glad to see the man. Ruby smiled, sure that many thought she was about to slap the Duke of the North. The main character was happy to do this, but she understood that it did not fit the concept of her harmless rabbit. Iske casually said that his wife seemed to have neither wit nor decency. The main character began to apologize for interfering, and Iska reminded that the girl herself promised not to drip on her brains. Ruby covered her mouth with her hand in delight and asked if the man was really listening to her at that moment. The Duke of the North turned and arched an eyebrow and asked what kind of nonsense the girl was talking about. The main character thanked Iska and promised that she would no longer bother him. The man looked at the girl in surprise when she said that from now on she would look at him, hiding on the sidelines. The main character realized that this would be enough, so she turned around to leave. However, Iske suddenly stopped the girl and demanded to repeat what she was going to do, hiding on the sidelines. Ruby replied in confusion that she would look at the man and follow him until he noticed her. The main character was frightened when Iska asked if the girl really wanted to die. Ruby replied that she was not, and the Duke of the North asked why the daughter of the Pope was going to do this. The main character replied, frightened, that she just wanted to see a man, but did not want to cause inconvenience. Ruby didn't know if Iski thought she was going to kill him secretly. A blonde knight chimed in and turned to Lady Rudbeckia, saying that her actions were very dangerous. The man told the girl that the Duke of the North almost thought that the lady was making an attempt on his life. The Knight of the North added that this is a very dangerous place, so they are somewhat different from other knights in terms of body structure. The man explained that if the lady was nearby, then when the energy was released, it would be impossible to distinguish her from the monster. The main character opened her eyes wide because she just wanted to follow her husband only in safe places. Ruby apologized for her tactlessness, reminding the men that she had come from the south. The blonde knight, noticing the sadness on the girl's face, replied in confusion that this was completely normal. Iske's younger sister came closer and said that the man should have told in advance if the schedule had changed. Freya winked at her friend and added that the man could have looked home, where incredible beauties were waiting for him. At the same moment, an awkward silence hung between the people. Looking at Iska's frowning face, the main character did not understand at all what this petty man was going to do. The Duke of the North was about to say something, but suddenly His Majesty the King came out. Solemn music sounded, and the head of the kingdom appeared in the banquet hall with his wife. The King of the British state approached the main character and greeted the girl. The head of the kingdom thanked the girl for having come such a long way to get to the north. The man smiled when the young girl said that she was also grateful for such a warm welcome from the king. The head of the kingdom told Ruby with a smile on his face that his nephew Sir Iska rarely appeared at his receptions on time. The Duke of the North angrily said that he had stabbed himself in the back, so he would have to consider it his fate. Isk turned around, and the main character was not even surprised, considering that the man was again in his repertoire. The ladies began to laugh, and Ruby was sure that even if her husband left her, he would still be the fool in the end. The king angrily shouted after his nephew that if he had not been the offspring of Sister Isis, they would have spoken quite differently. The queen began to calm the king, and the main character suddenly noticed a child peeking out from behind His Majesty's leg. A girl with wavy hair and large eyes looked with delight at the daughter of the Pope. The queen embarrassedly told her daughter that you can't look at people like that because you need to greet them politely right away. Princess Arian greeted Lady Rudbeckia, saying that she was very happy to welcome him to the royal palace of Angwan. The main character, with a wide smile on her face, thanked Princess Arian, thinking in her mind that the girl was very cute. After seeing the princess live, Ruby realized why the girl appeared so rarely in the original novel. The king was madly in love with the queen and princess, who had previously been slaves, but could not grant his daughter a great title. Due to the fact that Arian is a cousin of Iska and Helen, the girl will forever remain a stranger in British society. The main character immediately realized that this girl was insanely similar to her, but she could not show sympathy. After a while, all the guests of the banquet sat down at the table and began to make small talk. Freya got up from her seat, and Iska's younger sister asked if the girl was going somewhere now. Iska's friend said that she was just trying to bring the Duke back, but now he listens to her words in the same place. Iska's younger sister asked if her older brother had ever pretended to listen to his friend. Freya decided to change the subject and asked Lady Rudbeckia if she liked horseback riding, to which Ruby replied positively. Iska's friend was very happy, but the main character understood perfectly well that this was just a blatant lie. Ruby had studied several secular sports in her past life, but she had no good memories of any of them. One of the ladies said that no one would be able to keep up with the skill of the two miladies, since Iska himself had taught them. Freya told Lady Consolation with a bored look that it was a child, and now a lot has changed. Iska's friend said that in fact she just had a natural talent, and the Duke of the North had nothing to do with it. The main character noted that Consolation's look suggests that she is interested in the relationship between her and Freya. However, Ruby was all right, because she just needed to look like a fool who wouldn't hurt a fly. The main character thanked the lady, saying that she could not take up her husband's time over such trifles. The blonde Lady Consolation sneered slyly, mentally drawing certain conclusions to herself. Next, the aristocrats began to discuss the upcoming swordsman tournament, in which Sir Iske will participate this year. One of the society ladies said that she was very interested to find out which of the girls would become the Flower of Honor this year. The main character clenched her hands into fists, because she was sure that Cheshire would appear in the upcoming swordsman tournament. The Swordsman's Tournament is held every 3 years in Arundel and has been famous for its long and extensive history on the continent. That is why participants and the public from different countries gather at a large-scale event. The essence of the tournament was a death match against aggressive monsters, where only people from high society could participate. There was a cleric commission at the tournament, which meant that Cheshire would definitely be coming to meet Sister Ruby. The main character went out into the corridor and felt that she was dizzy from the alcohol drunk on an empty stomach. Suddenly, the young girl felt that someone, as he walked, touched her with his shoulder very painfully. The main character turned around with a confused smile, not understanding why everyone was grabbing her by the shoulders today. The stranger apologized and asked if the girl was okay, and Ruby asked with a smile who he was. The man introduced himself as Lorenzo Van Furien, saying that the girl had recently been together with his older sister. Ruby immediately realized that this guy was Freya's brother, and Lorenzo asked to let him take the girl to the hall. The main character replied that she was fine, and she just went out to get some fresh air. Ruby didn't understand why this man was looking at her so strangely with his beautiful purple eyes. The main character was stunned when she realized that this knight openly expresses his hostility towards her. Lorenzo scratched his head in embarrassment and apologized, saying that he just still couldn't believe that he could not believe that he saw Sir Iska's wife. The Knight of the North said that there was not a single person in this world who did not know the name of the daughter of the Pope. The main character smiled and said that she was not particularly known to the public, so the knight's words surprised her a little. After these words, there was an awkward silence in the air between the two people. Lorenzo broke the awkward silence by saying that among the popular songs, there was one that could describe Lady Rudbeckia. The man cleared his throat and offered the girl to listen to the lyrics of one of these songs, to which he immediately received a positive response. Ruby smiled as Lorenzo began to say that the Sextina's lark could not find a suitable man. With a smirk on his face, the Knight of the North added that the half-brothers of this bird are quite good. Suddenly, a familiar knight interrupted the lyrics of his comrade's song, saying that it was time for him to stop talking nonsense. Comrade Is began to demand that the knight immediately apologize to his mistress before his mouth was chopped off. The main character did not understand at all what to do, and the Knight of the North told Lorenzo that it was not worth arguing with the elders. With tears in his eyes, Freya's younger brother began to beg forgiveness from the wife of the Knight of the North. The main character was confused and asked the man to let Lorenzo go because she did not want to listen to an apology at all. Iski's fair-haired comrade let go of Lorenzo, and he ran away at the same moment. The man said irritably that this guy was a real fool. The Knight of the North put his hand on his heart and said that he was very uncomfortable in front of Lady Rudbeckia for what had happened. The main character reassured Sir Ivan, saying that everything was fine because it was not the first time she had heard such rumors. The fair-haired Knight of the North was confused when he noticed that Lady Rudbeckia had begun to cry. Ivan began to panic, and the main character said that she just thought that her husband also began to believe in these ridiculous rumors about her. The knight objected, saying that the Duke of the North had a trait of leaving those who annoyed him alone, so he had recently been surprised himself. Sir Ivan assured Ruby that Iske was simply confused because this was the first time that such a thing had happened to him. The blonde knight, then confused, suggested that his mistress let him escort her to the banquet hall. The main character smiled broadly and refused the man's offer, saying that she wanted to breathe some fresh air. Ruby waved her hand as soon as Sir Ivan said that if that fool Lorenzo returned, the girl could call him right away. The main character really hoped that the knight's words were true, because then her chances of survival could become higher. The young girl was interested to find out what other illusions the younger brother of Iska's friend had fallen into. Ruby was sure that the guy was unlikely to show her a strong dislike because of some rumors, which meant that it was connected with Freya. The main character went out into the garden and noticed a small man behind one of the statues. The young girl immediately recognized Princess Arian and called out to the little girl. The princess, with great excitement, asked her mistress not to say anything to her mother. Ruby deduced that Arian had left without asking and asked what the girl was doing alone in such a place. The princess looked at the main character in fear, and Ruby concluded that Arian was a very wary child. The main character decided that she would not interfere with the princess and would go elsewhere. The blonde girl stopped when Arian exclaimed that the mistress should not be there alone. The princess said that love is created only when two people are next to each other. Ruby could not even believe that there was such a pond in the royal palace, and the girl concluded that the king and queen were still romantics. The main character began to be touched by Arian's story that, according to her nanny, elves live in this pond, giving love. A blonde girl approached the princess and asked if she was holding a bouquet in her hands. Arian embarrassedly asked the girl if she thought this bouquet was beautiful. The main character replied with a smile that the bouquet was very lovely and asked to whom the princess was going to give it. Arian said that if the mistress allowed her to touch her luxurious hair, she would give this bouquet to her. The main character smiled, knowing full well that the little girl was mistaking her hair for a toy. Ruby turned her head and said that Arian could touch her hair as much as she wanted, but the princess replied that later. The main character froze abruptly when she heard Iska's voice behind her, who called out to the princess. Ruby is sick and tired of her husband constantly appearing behind her back and scaring her. However, most of all, the girl wanted to know why the little princess was so afraid of the Duke of the North. Iske told the princess that His Majesty was looking for her, who had told her not to wander alone last time. The little princess left a small bouquet in the hands of the main character and ran away. Iske quietly said that the first child, like the second, is never obeyed, but the main character believed that the man was the same. Ruby clarified if the man was looking for the princess, but the Duke of the North objected, saying that it was Ruby who was looking for her. The main character did not understand the logic in the man's actions, so she asked in confusion why he did it. Iske began to approach the girl, so Ruby thought that the man was now going to hit her in a deserted place. The main character closed her eyes, hoping that the Duke of the North would at least spare her life. The young girl's eyes widened when the man asked in displeasure what Ruby was doing now. Isuke wondered if the Princess of Romagna was also beaten as a child. However, Ruby did not understand how it was possible not to pee in her pants when a man was so frighteningly approaching. Isuke recalled that Ruby had only recently said that she wanted to look at him on the sly. As soon as the girl replied that she could just watch, Isuke asked with a smirk on her face if Ruby was hoping for a kiss. The main character mentally ordered herself to choose the right words so that Isuke would definitely not finish her off. The girl explained that she thought that the man would be angry, and Isuke asked if the girl really liked him anyway. The main character asked if a man really thinks that she cannot like him. The young girl reminded once again that the Duke of the North had been the first to protect her. Suddenly, a knight of the North ran into the garden and called loudly to his commander. Isuke asked what was the matter, and the young man with kind eyes replied that the Duke had better go himself. The man headed for the exit, and the main character began to praise all the gods for saving her right now. However, suddenly the Duke of the North stopped and asked the young girl to wait for him here. The main character waved her hand, realizing that Isuke was not done with her yet. After waiting for a while, Ruby remembered that the flowers in her hands were called exactly the same as her full name. In the language of flowers, Rudbeckia meant eternal happiness for a person. The main character sat down on the railing of the balcony and said that it sounded very ironic. Suddenly, the young girl felt that her body had lost her balance and she began to fall. In the next second, the main character plunged into the water, which began to pull the girl deeper and deeper. The young girl felt a wild cold and was already beginning to think that she would die like this. However, oddly enough, the main character did not feel any fear at all, plunging deeper and deeper. Ruby didn't understand what strange tentacles were wrapping around her, as if wanting to play with a young girl. No matter how hard Ruby tried, she couldn't get the thing off herself. The main character began to feel that she was suffocating exactly at the moment when she saw her hand next to her. In a few seconds, the young girl was on the surface right in her husband's arms. The aristocrats began to whisper among themselves that how could they fall into a pond in such a place? The main character did not understand at all what had just happened to her. Ruby immediately noticed what an evil look Isuke was looking at her right now. It seemed to the girl that she was dragged under the water by a monster, but a priori it could not be in the royal garden. However, most of all, the main character was worried about this terrible man who held her in his arms. Ruby hoped that Isuke wouldn't think she had thrown herself into the water to draw attention to herself. The main character tightly hugged the man by the neck and shouted that she was very scared, but the man saved her again. Ruby was sure that thanks to her cunning, the man would not be able to publicly accuse her again. The theory of the main character was confirmed, and Isuke did not say anything. The next morning, the maid went to the young lady's room and asked if she was awake. Having received a positive answer, the maid went into the room and told the lady that she had brought her breakfast. The main character replied to the girl that she should not have done this because she had a bad stomach. Ruby asked where Alina was now, to which the maid casually replied that Milady had left in the morning. The maid asked for permission to bow out, and the main character immediately thought how insensitive everyone in this place was. After a while, the main character dipped into a warm bath and felt how she immediately felt good. Ruby sank into the lower water and remembered yesterday's incident, which had clearly caused a big stir. Everyone was dismayed that inside the royal court, which required the strictest protection, a monster had attacked a man. Ruby knew that there were no monsters in the center of Arendelle, and the situation was similar to the one in her room. The main character was well aware that there were a lot of suspicious moments around her. The girl did not understand why she was the only one to get it, because in the original, Ruby had never been attacked by monsters. After a while, the girl dressed in a dress and sneezed very loudly. Ever since the main character's soul was in Ruby's body, she has had similar symptoms every twice a year. When the girl said that she was unwell, the family called a doctor for the first time, but the doctor said that she had no fever. The Pope said that this could not be because the girl was sick, to which the doctor replied that he himself did not understand anything. The doctor asked for forgiveness from the Holy Pope in the same way as other doctors did. As soon as the doctor left, the Pope approached his daughter and put his hand on her forehead. The man asked in an icy tone that the girl had lied to her father because she did not want to get engaged to him. After this incident, the main character could only endure this pain, but the symptoms disappeared after a few days. Ruby decided not to call the doctor, lest her husband think she was doing it on purpose again. Suddenly, the main character remembered that she never found out why Iske then asked her to wait. The young girl put the comb on the bedside table and decided that the iron should be forged while it was hot. The main character left her room and, after walking a little, peeked out from behind a stone wall. The knights felt the young lady's gaze on them and began to think that the girl would soon drill a hole in them. The soldiers asked in confusion if the lady wanted anything from them, and the main character apologized for interfering. The young girl wondered if the knights knew where her husband was right now. The main character immediately noticed how the knights looked away and were confused. Ruby turned on her acting skills and plaintively said that she understood perfectly well that men could not tell her. The knights could not stand it anymore and took the young lady to the port of Elmos, fearing that in the future they might get from Sir Iske. The main character went to the window of the building and looked through it to make sure that her husband was definitely there. Ruby wondered if the Duke of the North had any important negotiations in this building. The main character did not expect at all that she would see cheerful drinking nights inside the building. The soldiers happily shouted that alcohol was just fine during the day. The main character has already begun to doubt whether these valiant men are knights. The young girl was well aware that she looked like a real spy from the outside. Shifting her gaze to another part of the room, the main character immediately found her husband talking to someone. Now the young girl did not understand how to get close to the Duke of the North. As soon as Ruby, looking at Iske, said that he was an arrogant type, the girl heard a man's voice and froze. The main character turned around abruptly when someone asked who the young lady was talking about now. The young girl looked at the young man with kind eyes and did not understand who he was at all. The main character was so frightened by the unexpected appearance of an unknown guy that she almost threw away her skates. Looking closer, the young blonde girl realized that she had seen this young man before when he called Iske in the garden. The knight with kind eyes apologized to the girl, saying that it seemed to him that she was hiding from someone. The main character considered the Knight of the North peculiar because he followed her on her heels. However, Ruby did not feel the same hostility towards her from the young man as Lorenzo had. As soon as the knight asked if the lady was okay, the main character, with a wide smile on her face, thanked the young man for his concern. The Knight of the North replied embarrassedly that he was very glad that everything was fine with the young girl. The young man said that Iske's previous student had made a mistake, so he was lucky to take his place. The main character was very surprised, and the Knight of the North said that the man had sung an obscene song in front of Sir Iske. Ruby assumed that now the young man was talking about Lorenzo, who also sang her an obscene song. The Knight of the North asked why the lady was hiding in such a place, to which Ruby replied that she had come to meet her husband. The young man looked at the young girl in surprise when she said that she just wanted to look at Sir Iske. The knight said that he understood perfectly well that the girl liked to admire from afar, and Ruby sneezed at that very moment. The young man asked if Sir Iske was affectionate to a girl, because if she left, the man would obviously be upset. The main character was sure that such an insensitive oak as Iske would not be upset at all. The blonde girl assumed that the guy had stopped being nervous because he was living by getting scolded by Iske. The Knight of the North crossed his arms in front of him and said that his commander was not the kind of person who would beg the girl to wait for him. The main character asked the young man why all the Knights of the North had gathered in this place. The knights and Ruby's eyes widened as Iske, standing behind them, told the girl that she needed to lie down on her face next time. The young people abruptly turned their heads back and screamed at the same time, as they were surprised by the sudden appearance of the man. The main character, with a wide smile on her face, said that her husband was just perfect itself, and the knight confirmed Ruby's words. Ivan appeared from behind the bushes and was delighted to see the mistress, and then said that they were wondering who the bastard was talking to. The Knight of the North, with kind eyes, scratched his head and said in confusion that he should leave. The main character greeted Ivan, and he asked how the young mistress was feeling because he was worried about her. The blonde man wondered if Lady Ruby had come to meet the ferocious bastard, alluding to Iske. The main character immediately looked at the stern face of her husband, which burned the girl with his gaze. Ruby smiled and apologized to Iske, saying that she didn't mean to disturb him, but just wanted to thank him for yesterday. Ivan grinned and said that this stern man should thank him for having the honor of saving his wife. The Duke of the North replied sternly that he had just done what he had to do and nothing more. The main character quietly replied that Iske was right, because if she died, She would put everyone in an uncomfortable position. The Duke of the North arched an eyebrow and asked what the girl meant, and Ivan said in confusion that the lady should not say that. The fair-haired knight of the North asked if the young lady would like to dine with them. As soon as Ruby asked if she would be a nuisance, Ivan replied that of course not. The main character arched an eyebrow when she noticed that in an instant, both men began to look at her dumbfounded. The young girl did not immediately notice that her nose began to bleed in large drops. As soon as the main character noticed, she was horrified, because this had never happened to her before. The blonde man anxiously asked how the mistress was feeling, and Iska continued to look dumbfounded. The main character began to say that nothing terrible had happened, and inside she felt incredible shame in front of Iska. The blonde girl began to lose her balance, but the Duke of the North managed to catch his wife. Iska asked in confusion why the young girl was so hot now. The main character could not believe that Iska understood this, because even the most experienced healers shook their heads. The young girl began to apologize to her husband in fright, saying that she did not do it on purpose. Ivan handed Iska a white handkerchief and asked her mistress when the healer would arrive. The main character admitted that she did not tell anyone about her condition, because of such a trifle, you should not call a doctor. The Duke of the North began to gently wipe the blood from the blonde girl's face, saying that she was very hot. Every year, Ruby felt a strange pain, the symptoms of which even the most eminent healers could not understand. The main character simply considered it a kind of side effect due to the fact that her soul ended up in someone else's body. The young girl was a little perplexed and amazed at the fact that the Duke of the North managed to feel that she was on fire. Suddenly, the main character felt that her head began to spin very much. The young girl began to gradually lose consciousness, and Iski tried with all his might to get through to the mistress. Before closing her eyes, Ruby saw the anxious faces of the two men in front of her and thought that this was lawlessness. Plunging into impenetrable darkness, the main character heard that someone was crying bitterly and assumed that it was Alina. The blonde girl suddenly opened her eyes wide, not understanding what was happening now. The main character stood up and mentally asked herself how much time she had slept. The young lady did not understand who had been crying so incessantly lately. The main character threw open the door and saw Iska and the doctor right in front of her, who was explaining something to the Duke about her. The blonde girl was very surprised that these men were standing right under her door. The main character did not understand why the healer was looking at her so angrily right now. The blonde girl asked the men who had just cried, but they looked at the girl in bewilderment. Ruby explained that she had heard someone crying and was worried that it might be Alina. The men looked at each other, not understanding what the young lady was talking about. The Duke of the North calmly replied to his wife that no one had cried right now. The main character began to wave her hands, saying that this was not a lie, because she really heard that someone was crying bitterly. The blonde girl was very surprised when the Duke of the North calmly said that he hadn't said that the girl had just lied. Iske told the attending physician that he could go, and the doctor promised that he would call on the young lady later. The main character put her hand to her forehead, and the Duke of the North looked at his wife carefully. Suddenly, Iska threw the young lady over his shoulder and carried the girl to the bedroom. The main character began to mentally resent her, believing that the man had just mistaken her for a bag of potatoes. However, Ruby understood that at such a moment she had to react nicely, so he said that Iska was like a real prince. The main character embarrassedly asked the man not to be angry with her, because she really thought that it was Alina crying. The Duke of the North stopped in front of the bed and repeated that his younger sister was not crying. Iske gently laid Ruby on the bed, and the girl said that she still had what she was good at. The main character smiled when the Duke of the North asked what exactly the girl meant. However, then Iski scratched his head and said that it didn't matter at all. The main character really smiled, because she thought that she could amazingly pretend to be an awesome actress. The Duke of the North froze as he looked at the smiling young lady. Iske wanted to say something but changed his mind, so he turned around and promised that they would talk later. The door slammed shut, and the main character felt irritation inside herself from the actions of the man. The young girl shuddered when she heard a dull thud in the hallway. The Duke of the North walked up to the wall and slammed his head on it to somehow come to his senses. As it turned out, the main character had a common fever, so the healer ordered her not to skip meals. Now the big disadvantage for Ruby was that she could not avoid eating. Alina told the young lady that everyone was seriously frightened when they found out that the girl had lost consciousness. The main character admitted that she was sorry, since she caused so much trouble. Alina said that it was the first time she had seen her older brother so confused. The main character was also surprised because she thought that Isuke, on the contrary, should have been happy about such an event. Ruby was 100% sure that Isuke would not care if she died in front of his eyes or not. Alina said that, be that as it may, she was extremely glad that the young lady was already recovering. As soon as Isuke's sister suggested that Ruby join horseback riding on the weekend, the main character immediately agreed. The blonde girl thanked Alina for asking her. The main character knew that this was a great opportunity for her to make a good impression on people from local circles. A few days later, the maid asked the young lady if this was enough for the girl's image. As soon as Ruby asked if the girl thought she needed to add something, the maid replied that she couldn't give her opinion. The main character asked the girl to choose something for herself, and at the same time take a hairpin for herself. The maid looked at her mistress in disbelief and asked why she should take something for herself. The main character, with a big smile on her face, said that it was a gift, as the girl looked after her during her illness. The maid was skeptical, even when Ruby said she wanted to make a gift as a thank you. The main character added that let this little secret remain between them, because it will be uncomfortable in front of others. The maid still took the hairpin for herself, and the main character was even glad, because all these jewelry were given to her by Cheshire. The maid thanked the girl a little stiffly for the gift. The main character asked the girl how long she had already been working, and the maid replied that she had been working for almost 3 years. The maid told me that the head maid had been serving in this place since the early childhood of the heir and milady. The main character immediately realized that this maid also did not like the head servant. The blonde girl thanked the maid for the information and said that the girl could go. At first, Ruby considered the head maid to be a very loyal person, but now the main character had a different opinion. In fact, horseback riding is an open-air party where aristocrats gather to make acquaintances. Horses at such an event were just for the background, because such gatherings were a kind of social club. Ruby decided, since she hadn't been able to leave a good impression at the royal court before, she would try it now. Freya came up to the main character and said that the lady had no idea how much she was worried when she learned about her illness. Isuke's friend said that she wanted to visit the mistress, but thought that she might be uncomfortable, and changed her mind. Freya stroked her horse and said with a big smile on her face that it was a great joy that the lady had recovered. The main character was very surprised to notice that this horse can build such shiny eyes. However, everything was obvious to Ruby, because it was she who stole Freya's place, so Isuke's friend seemed special to everyone. Alina approached the main character and said that all the horses were well trained, so the mistress could choose anyone. Isuke's younger sister added that Ruby can choose anyone, except for those on the right side. As soon as the main character asked why you can't choose those horses, Alina replied that her brother rides them. Freya anxiously asked if the rest of the horses would be a little rough for her mistress, as she had just recovered from her illness. Emily said that they wouldn't be skating for a long time, so there was no need to worry. Isuke's younger sister offered the main character to help her choose the most obedient horse. The blonde girl looked at all the horses in the paddocks and couldn't figure out which one was obedient. The main character closed her eyes from the realization that all these horses discriminated against her. As soon as Freya noticed her friend, she immediately smiled broadly and greeted Isuke. The Duke of the North calmly replied to his friend that she was too cheerful early in the morning. Isuke approached the main character, and Freya said that his beautiful wife was planning to have fun with them today. The blonde girl said with delight that her husband was still just beautiful today. Ruby asked if Isuke was going somewhere, and the man said that he did nothing on the day of rest. The main character said that she was choosing a horse for herself to meet on horseback, and invited Isuke to go with them. The Duke of the North, with his arms crossed over his chest, turned away and replied that he was busy today. The main character mentally began to scold her husband because he himself said that he did nothing that day. The blonde girl asked embarrassedly if she could choose any horse. The sister and brother exchanged glances as soon as the young lady said that she did not know how to choose with her eyes. Alina informed the Duke of the North that the attending physician had said that was enough. Isuke's sister suggested that her brother choose a horse for himself and give Ruby a ride to the meeting place, and he and Freya would go first. A friend of the Duke's family wanted to object, but Alina said that it was time for them to go. The main character wanted to stop her younger sister Iske, but the girl left Ruby. The blonde girl muttered words of apology and informed Iska that she would rather go home. The main character flinched when the Duke of the North abruptly told her to stop. Iske called the groom to him, and the man immediately approached his master. The Duke of the North pointed his thumb towards the door and ordered the worker to leave. The groom immediately ran away, and the main character wondered why it was necessary to drive this man away at all. The blonde girl froze when it dawned on her that now she and Iska were left alone. The main character hated the stables, and even more so she was there with a ruthless creature. In both her past and present life, Ruby had two similar experiences that made her hair stand on end. The main character began to mentally ask herself to calm down, because due to some stupid injury she could not spoil everything. Iske called out to Ruby and said that she had some kind of strange expression on her face, and the lady remembered how earlier she had been asked not to cry. The Duke calmly asked Ruby to follow him, and a voice sounded inside the girl, telling the shameless girl to come quickly. Iske asked if the girl wanted to take it, and the voice inside the main character told her to bring it lively. The Duke of the North explained that this horse is stupid, so this is the only way to treat it. Ruby felt like she was having a panic attack, so she mentally told herself that she could hold out. Iske explained that although this horse looks grumpy, in fact it can be dealt with. The Duke of the North looked at his consort dumbfounded as the girl collapsed to her knees. The main character began to ask for forgiveness, saying that she had committed a mortal sin. Iske's eyes widened as she said it was all her fault because she didn't know her place. The main character looked with horror at the whip lying in front of her and said that she was completely hopeless.